my belief was everybody else held the right to decide whether or not I was good enough.
Yep.
And I had to constantly prove it over and over and over and over again for year after year after year and year after year after year. You know?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so that's the unconscious wounded career path. That's not a great place.
It isn't. And I think more and more of us are there, unfortunately. Now, you just used an acronym, and I want to dig into it a little bit more because I had never heard of this acronym. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, I could have, there's a whole other way to enter into this concept of being trauma informed, and it's ASDP. So can you tell us a little bit, how did you find out about this? Like, is it surfacing more in the literature?
Well, when Martha and I were writing the book and we started to realize how many of us out there in the world, again, the research suggesting at least 2/3 experienced one or potentially more major traumas before the age of 18, we were trying to think of a name. What are we? And there are a few terms out there, a few acronyms. ACOA, Adult Children of Alcoholics, is one.
Mm,
And ACOA is a wonderful organization. I went to the ACOA meetings for many years when I was living in Chicago. However, it was very narrow. It was all about growing up with addiction, alcoholism or drug addiction
right.
family. What we were talking about related to childhood trauma or adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, as they're referred to, is that's a very broad bucket. That's a very broad bucket of experiences that people can have. The ACEs come from a body of research that were, CDC and Kaiser Permanente and two doctors back in the late 90s did a study of 17,000 adults in the US. And I've researched this, and I know that the studies have been replicated in other countries also. And they asked people, the 17,000 people, to say, of these 10 adverse childhood experiences, how many did you experience? And they're pretty traumatic things, physical, emotional, sexual abuse, neglect, violence in the home, addiction in the home, mental illness in the home. The list goes, these
Yep.
are pretty serious things. And, so that's a broad bucket of experiences. And I think there are many other adverse childhood experiences that weren't covered in the original survey. Poverty, discrimination,
Yep.
bullying. There are a lot of experiences that we can have when we're growing up, which is why Martha and I came up with this broad term, adult survivor of a damaged past. And at first I kind of, I was resistant to it. I'm like, I don't know. I don't like calling myself that. But then as I've been working with the acronym and the concept is, we are adults today. And as adults, we have opportunity to really actually reprogram the neural pathways in our brain because
Yep.
of the science of neuroplasticity and positive psychology. So we can come to our workplaces as an adult. The S is survivor, which is really a recognition of resilience and the fact that, we don't have any idea the kinds of things that our colleagues and our bosses and our leaders and our employees have experienced. But I believe that if you've had one of those major adverse childhood experiences or others, you are resilient. And so there's this essence of survivor for me, it's a strength word.
Yeah.
D for damaged is just recognizing that there's been some dysfunctionality that occurred and that there's some damaged beliefs that we carry about ourselves. And again, like, I've talked about it often is completely unconscious, our connection of those limiting beliefs to the past. So my limiting beliefs, for example, I'm not good enough. I deserve to get in trouble. I know somebody a very senior level person in a completely different profession, shared with me that his limiting belief was he couldn't do anything right.
Yeah.
His dad told him that every day. So the list goes on and on. So that damaged piece is those damaged beliefs that we carry with us. That's the D. And then the P stands for past, which is a recognition that these things happened in the past, but that we're often carrying them like luggage, baggage with us into our present day. And so we coined the term ASDP. That's a Susan Martha
Oh,
creation.
that's amazing. I know, like when I saw it, I just really resonated. I thought it was a softer way because, like you, I did not equate anything in my life with the word trauma.
Me
And
either.
everyone else around me was looking in, equating it, but I couldn't. But a damaged past and survivor, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I think I could walk through that door and not, the similar to you, the voices were so just always kind of putting me in a position of I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this, versus like learning how to be and being more conscious about some of those thoughts that, well, I still have to work at, right, to get
Yeah.
them out.
Well, you just made a really good point that I want to build on, which is the concept of not really resonating with the word trauma. I absolutely, like, that word and me never went along together. I never thought of my childhood as
Yep.
a trauma childhood. I never thought of my childhood as dysfunctional because I knew people had it far worse than I did.
Yep.
And then I had a therapist who was amazing, and she recommended I go to a healing trauma program. And I remember thinking, why? What are you talking about? Well, it was a great program. It was 7 days, very intensive. And what I learned in that program, and you talk about this in your book also, I loved it when I saw it in your book, is that there are different kinds of trauma. There's the big T trauma, and then there's the little trauma, little T trauma. And the big T trauma are like the things that we were talking about with the adverse childhood experiences.
Yeah.
But then little T trauma is like lots of little things that happen chronically, like never being sure when my dad was going to explode and charge me.
Yeah.
That sort of constant state of being in hypervigilance and always on guard, that over time, that chronic experience of little T's actually equates to a big T trauma.
Yeah.
And then it made sense to me.